Welcome to Three, a part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Gill Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. The match we have been waiting for and hoping for all year long is upon us, and it comes at Roland Garros in the semifinal. Friday afternoon, Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic will clash. And let's just start with the hype around this matchup and the excitement around the matchup. I have my own list kind of going in my head of the most highly anticipated matches in recent times, and most of them, if not all of them, involve our big three in some way or another. But Joel, what is your take and your perspective on just where this stacks up among highly anticipated matches in recent times?
This is a fantastic thing, even more so than, I think back, it was intriguing when Pete Sampras played Roger Federer for the first and would prove the only time at Wimbledon in 2001. Federer then was kind of in the ascent. He'd cracked the top 20. But now we have one guy who's the new number one, the long-standing number one, the 36-year-old who's mastered a certain way of contemporary tennis versus this exciting player. I mean, it's just tremendous. Very, very exciting.
It's different than when the big three play each other. I mean, like if Novak plays Rafa, Roland Garros, that's huge. But we've seen it before. It's another chapter in their rivalry, and of course, I know myself and a lot of people, we drop everything to watch that kind of a match. But this is different because they've only played once before, and it was best of three, and it was in Madrid, that match you love to talk about, Gill, which deservedly so. And now you can finally maybe have another one to talk about. But this is best of five at a Grand Slam, and the stakes are so high. And the hype, just because of the 16-year age difference, it takes on a different complexion.
100%.
Well, the generational aspect. I mean, generational aspect, like the movie All About Eve, where it's like, okay, the long-standing leader, and now along comes the new one, and he jumped into that number one spot, and he's already won one slam title, so he's notched some credibility already.
Yeah, the generational aspect is a big thing with the age gap. This has happened before, right, Joel? Like, you think about McEnroe versus Connors, and it's just we know we have a shorter window of that kind of matchup happening. It's not going to be 15 years we're watching Djokovic Alcaraz. It is a small window of opportunity. That kind of adds importance to it, but also, how does that change the way you look at the matchup?
Well, you see how precious it is, and also that you've got one guy who, we know Novak isn't quite at the end, but we do know he's 36, and there's a lot more ahead for Alcaraz than there is for Novak. Everybody knows that. So I'm thinking back to, you mentioned the age gap. Jimmy Connors, Ken Rosewall, 1974 Wimbledon final. Connors is 21, Rosewall's 39. They met a few months later at the US Open. Connors is 22 and Rosewall was 39. So, but that was like a tremendous effort on Rosewall's part to get that far, and Connors destroyed him in both those finals. It was a good matchup for Connors, and there were some other factors, but that's a long gap. It also says so much about how sustainable Novak's career has been. That he's, it's not like it's like, wow, look at Novak. He got to the semis at this age. No, yeah, that was expected. It's not like Novak it's unexpected for him to do this. Here he is. He won the Australian Open. Carlos won the US Open.
And before then, Novak won Wimbledon. So it's the winners of last three majors, but in the last two, they haven't been in the field together, which adds to this. I mean, Amy, you bring up scarcity, and I think that's a big deal here. The fact that not only have we only seen it once, it was over a year ago, and Alcaraz is better than he was at that time last year, especially because he was dealing with some stuff when it comes to handling the pressure. Maybe not yet in Madrid, but after he won Madrid, I think that became kind of an issue for him. I mean, the NFL owns a day of the week because of scarcity. If there was a football game on every day, it wouldn't be as big a deal. But it's, you only get to see your team play on Sunday for 18 weeks out of the year, and that changes it. So I think that also kind of adds to the mystery and the intrigue here. It's got everything. So to me, like I think back to last year, the Roland Garros quarterfinal between Nadal and Djokovic, and that was interesting because Novak had won the last one. So it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can Djokovic win 2 in a row against Nadal in Paris? And that felt big. So that's up there. I think the Medvedev Djokovic US Open 2021 final is up there because the Grand Slam was on the line and Djokovic was only 1 match away. I think the Wimbledon 2019 final with Federer and Djokovic probably even surpasses this one because it was a final and because there was a sense that this was one of Roger's last chances, and it felt like it had really big slam race implications. So those are the ones that kind of stick out in my head. I feel like this is right there.
Looking at some recent ones of note, well, then you could go like the 0-2 Agassi-Sampras U.S. Open final, where they had both lost early at Wimbledon. No one knew at the time that was going, including Pete, that was going to be his last ever match. But nonetheless, the long familiar rivals. So it's interesting about the length span of that. I mean, because they had been number 1 in the world in 1995, and now 7 years later they're playing. But now with Novak, I mean, Novak has added such new terms to longevity. I mean, and him and Rafa, I believe that one last year, I would, instead of scarcity, we'd say plentitude. And that was pretty good too. I mean, wasn't that, I believe, the 10th time they'd met at Roland Garros last year? So, but that doesn't diminish my my hunger for it. I mean, I like pizza again and again.
But it is the law of supply and demand. And quick gut check, who are the 2 best players in the world? Probably Alcaraz and Djokovic, and they just haven't met all that much, which makes this feel even bigger. And you really spot on, Gill, when you say that Alcaraz is not the same player he was a year, 2 years ago, and I think that was driven home by the Tsitsipas match, because they famously played in the US Open, very close match in 2021, and the match against Tsitsipas was just a clinic and a schooling. And I was struck by how much Alcaraz has improved even from that great level in 2021. So this has all the hallmarks of a potential blockbuster.
Let's hit on those quarterfinals. I was going to go there, Amy.
Okay.
The form coming in, we'll start with Alcaraz. Musetti, who is playing great tennis in the 4th round. Shapovalov in the 3rd round. Shapo not in great form, but we just know that he's uncomfortable and dangerous and talented. And then Tsitsipas, the former finalist, the 2-time Monte Carlo champion in the quarterfinals. Alcaraz has never been threatened in these last 3 matches, even a little bit. I mean, it's been total cruise control, and it's been amazing to see. I did not expect, even as someone who picked Alcaraz to win the tournament before the tournament and was unfazed by the Marozsan upset, did not concern me at all. Even it being in that position, I'm stunned at how dominant this has been.
I think it's interesting you mentioned these last 3 opponents, Shapovalov, Musetti, Tsitsipas. These are kind of people who have fallen the treacherous shot maker. We've all played enough tennis to know you don't want to be known as a shot maker primarily. It's nice to have that as a secondary attribute, but if that's primary and you're playing someone as fit, fast, and focused as Alcaraz, I mean, I thought, for example, with Tsitsipas, I thought he's not dynamic enough or consistent enough. So he's going to get trapped in between both of those, and even more so with the other 2 guys. And so Alcaraz, for all his brilliance of things he can do, he can also settle into kind of like consistency mode and then strike mode. And Musetti was a great example of that, of how, reminded me of this story. I wrote about it from a jazz musician once told another. He started making this gesture with his hands, and the guy who was less skilled said, "What's that mean?" He goes, "Play faster." He goes, "What's that mean?" "Play slower." Then he did this other thing. He said, "What does that mean?" "Play better." And you saw in that Musetti match, every time it was like fairly early, "Oh, right, play better." And he just upped it and left him. It's like watching a guy in a sprint. Just, okay, I'm leaving you behind. And these are top 20 players. It's amazing.
Yeah, both guys. I always do my Roland Garros power rankings. Both Musetti. Musetti was in the top, 14 of that, and Tsitsipas was well within the top 10. What about Djokovic? Quarterfinal against Khachanov, and before then Juan Pablo Varillas. Varillas, a good draw, somebody who had never been that far at a major, somebody who does not possess big weapons, and Novak did roll in that match. Against Khachanov, he dropped the first set. I've been kind of blasting this stat out here because I think it's amazing. Since the start of 2021, Djokovic, when losing the first set at a major, is 13-2. So he does it again. He comes back from behind, shaky a little bit, even in the second set. He wins that one in a tiebreak. He's now 5-0 in tiebreaks here at Roland Garros. He hasn't made an unforced error in any of his 5 tiebreaks. I think he's played something like 47 points. But things really didn't click into place from a level standpoint until the third and the fourth set. Amy, how did you feel about that performance in the quarterfinals ahead of such a big match in the semis against Alcaraz?
Well, before I comment on that, I just want to take you back to Carlitos' run, and Shapovalov, Musetti, and Tsitsipas are all one-handed backhands.
Yes.
So now he's going to go up against a two-handed backhand, which is one of the best backhands in the world, maybe first or second to his own. So that actually could be a slight advantage for Novak. I just wanted to put that out there. But now we're talking about Novak's run. What was interesting to me, and Jim Courier elucidated this really well on the telecast, Novak has really been experimenting with this loopy ball forehand. He called it a moon ball. It's not really a moon ball, but it's just a really lot of top spin on it, which you don't see Novak hit like ever. And I texted you, Gill, and I'm like, why is he doing this? And you said, well, it's worked for him at times in his first few matches. And sure enough, he found that it just wasn't working for him against Khachanov. So he changed tacks and blew by Khachanov. So I find that, like, in a best of 5, Novak has this problem-solving ability, and he has the luxury of time and space to do it. And that doesn't bode well for Alcaraz, because I don't know if at his young age he has the experience to experiment like this. But I too picked Alcaraz pre-tournament. Now that the tournament is underway, remember way back in the day before the tournament, we were concerned about some of Djokovic's injuries.
Yeah.
That hasn't borne out at all. So now that the tournament has gone on, to me, if I were an odds maker, this is a pick-em match. I don't see how anyone can pick this match with any certainty. It is just there's so many complicating factors. It's just really hard for me to tell.
Well,
Well,
for
it
the
is
record,
really a
if
slim
I
one to. Yeah, go on, Gil.
just want to jump in here and say that the actual odds are in favor of Alcaraz, and last I saw last night was like in the -180 range. So I don't know what the implied probability of that is off the top of my head, but I think the reason why Alcaraz has come in a favorite like this is because of the recent form. But Joel, I want you to kind of pick up.
Well, that's what I think too. I think the reason for this would be the form over the last few months, and as opposed to Novak just over the last few days. I mean, Novak only the last few days as he started to show what he showed months ago when he won Australia, and Alcaraz has set the tone over the course of this year to a good degree. And of course, he missed Australia, so we're a little insufficient data on that front. I think though for Novak, it'll be more of a command performance for Novak based on how he's played this year than it would be for Alcaraz. That doesn't mean he's the deep underdog, and I agree. It's like if you're doing it like a political poll, you'd say it's 51%, 52% Alcaraz, maybe, and that's not even a proper thing. So it's very, very close, and all these different factors play into it. I think the thing you mentioned about experience, Amy, is really good. A good source friend of mine, Brent Abel, a coach and a very prominent age group player, he thought the longer it goes, the more that might aid Novak for that reason. The experience factor, the problem solving. Maybe he takes the measure of all of Carlos's. He's experimentation is no problem for Alcaraz. That's fine, but there's at a certain point, does he find himself running out of questions? And this is going to get to my Novak tiebreak genius. And I was actually really impressed how Novak, when he lost that first set versus Khachanov, I thought, oh my, is this going to be a very physical, long, like a match he played against Del Potro once at Wimbledon that left him, even if he won it, really worn out. It didn't turn out that way. And Amy, you texted us, what I think was it early in the third set that says Novak so has this match now.
Yeah.
And he pretty much did. From then on, it was pretty smooth sailing. So yeah, this is very, very exciting.
Yeah. First of all, to follow up on my last thing, odds are actually minus 210. Implied probability of that is 68%. So the books have 68% Alcaraz. I actually think everybody's getting duped here. I agree with you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares that Alcaraz beat Tsitsipas and Musetti and Shapovalov in dominant straight sets, and Novak lost the first set and went to a tiebreak in the second set against Khachanov, and Alejandro Davidovich-Fokina took him to 2 tiebreaks? I don't think that matters at all for what's going to happen in this semifinal. I think that's all window dressing.
Well, no one who analyzes it does. I mean, I think this odd stuff is a reflection of a market and where people are assigning certain things. That's different than if you asked 25 coaches or experts how they said. None of them would say, "Oh yeah, he's a 68% chance of winning."
But you're right. It is a market. It is a market, and I don't want to get too into like. I get it, but I don't want to get too into also like how odds are made and stuff. But you're right. It is a market. I do think though the prevailing sense is that Alcaraz is playing better. And I just think from a discussion standpoint, that is undeniably true. If you just have watched the recent matches, yes, that's true. I don't think that matters for Friday. It doesn't matter that he played better in the match before. To me, what I tweeted out is this is not swimming. This is not Formula One qualifying. 2 players get on the court together and they are connected. There is a relationship. There is disruption. Exactly. Just because Alcaraz looked better against Tsitsipas than Djokovic did against Khachanov doesn't mean you can copy paste that to what it's going to look like for the semifinal.
Well, that's why predictions are predictions and they're not necessarily analysis. And that's where we come in. So maybe we ought to, let's look at the tennis.
Yes. Okay. I mean, let's do it.
I don't know. I'll play the Gill role. I'll play the Gill role for a second. Gill, you know the contemporary game. You learned from a Spanish-raised coach, and you're a contemporary baseliner. So how do you see some of the X's and O's playing out?
Okay, well, let's start with the Alcaraz perspective then. What I think he's going to look to do, first of all, I think the biggest thing that kept working for him in Madrid was the serve +1 off the kicker out wide on the ad side. And the one area where Djokovic just doesn't get as much pace on his backhand is when it's high above his shoulders, which is really true for almost any two-hander. It's hard to do against a Zverev or a Medvedev, 6'6", or even a Khachanov. But against Djokovic, you can get it up high above his shoulders and attack the next ball because it usually doesn't have the depth and the pace. Not only do I think Alcaraz is going to look to do that with his kick serve, I also think he's going to look to do that off the ground. Heavy topspin forehands into Djokovic's backhand, and just to try to draw that attackable ball and push Novak back with the heavy topspin, attack with height is essentially what it boils down to. And then from there, I think Alcaraz can use his forehand, and we know how he combines the pace and the drop shot so well. It disguises those two things so well. And really, I think when you're playing Alcaraz, almost the name of the game is you can't give him anything to attack because nobody's really better, especially on a clay court, from that position. So that's what I think is going to be one of Alcaraz's main approaches. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah. Although I will say that knowing that Novak studies and has an analytics team, he will know exactly when and where the tendencies will be to use the kick. And as perhaps the greatest returner in history, he has seen that heavy kick to the backhand a million times. He knows how to neutralize it. So I think it's a good strategy, but If it's not working, there's got to be a plan B. I also, when you get to it, I have some thoughts on how Novak could get to Carlos.
Joel, anything on Alcaraz and his path to victory, and then we'll get to
Absolutely.
Novak?
Well, sure. So, well, here's the way I also think about it. First of all, I've always wondered, and it's interesting given that Novak's idol growing up was Pete Sampras. I've always wondered how Novak would fare versus a sustained attacker, because there haven't been too many at the highest levels. Federer's had obviously his share of moments, but some like Alcaraz is a little different, particularly with the kick serve, with the angle volleys. I'm not saying Alcaraz is going to be Stefan Edberg and run that sequence 50 times. Nonetheless, that whole way of pressing Novak that way, I think, is interesting. And the bigger picture, the thing is also, we talked about the generational thing. It's also stylistic. Novak has mastered what a coach would call today's game, the game of today, the modern game. And I say this all the time to parents and coaches and players. I don't want you learning today's game. I want you learning the game of tomorrow. And here Alcaraz is our look into how tennis might be played. It's a stylistic thing. He's not just like Sampras. Federer had kind of a variation of the Sampras game, so he was just taking it into a new century. Alcaraz is bringing something entirely different stylistically and even developmentally. Alcaraz was 4 years old when Djokovic won his first major, so he spent his entire life studying the big three and seeing what questions am I going to be able to ask them. I mean, Ferrero said this great thing. He said, ask him to go to the net in a match point. He's able to do it. He's able to do every kind of shot. And Alcaraz's expansiveness, that's his thing, is the breadth, whereas Novak is a little more narrow and yet incredibly brilliant. So so that's some of my thoughts on Alcaraz.
I think it's combined with a level of speed and power that certainly Nadal had in his own way, but you're right, Alcaraz is a much more offensive package of it. That's one area where I think if you boil it down to the skill sets that these two have, I mean, Alcaraz does have more pace generating ability, and he does scramble at this point better. Better than anybody on tour right now by far. So it's hard to get the ball past him, as Tsitsipas discovered in that quarterfinal, and he gets the ball past you or puts the ball in front of you for a drop shot winner about better than anybody else. So I'm curious to see, like, how will the physicality, just the pure speed and power, how will that look against Novak on the court? Because I think, like, from a technical ability, when it comes to the mental side, the adjustments, that the experience that you're talking about, Amy, that's where we know that Novak is right there. But are the raw capabilities of Alcaraz going to present a really big challenge for Novak?
I also think that Novak has better overall depth, because while extremely powerful, especially on the forehand, he doesn't have that consistency of depth. And I don't care who you are, nobody likes a ball deep at their shoes. So I don't know, just in terms of accuracy and placement, I give Novak the advantage there. But I don't know if you want to get to this yet, but I think Novak's going to be looking very closely at that loss in Rome to Marozsan and picking apart exactly how that guy was able to get to Carlitos. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So let's go to Novak. To me, what that would mean is a lot of serve plus one drop shot. So drop shot the first ball, like don't even let it get past that, because now you've missed your opportunity. Alcaraz is going to return from deep and he's going to try to move up. So your best chance to drop shot is off the +1. That's what Marozsan was able to kind of implement. And then the second thing, which I think is going to be really important, and Sinner has done this well too, you have to make Alcaraz really uncomfortable off of his own +1. You should be clubbing his serve when you can. And I'm pretty confident Djokovic is going to do that. But like, if you can be very, very aggressive, because we're not talking about Federer or Sampras. This is a serve that you will get your chances to actually hit out on, because he'll miss some spots here and there. And I think Novak needs to be really on top of that and very aggressive, even on the first serve return.
I think
this makes me
go ahead, Joel. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think in that match, I looked this up. Marozsan used the drop shot 12 times. A lot of them were very memorable. And while that is, impressive, that wasn't actually what won him the match. You're right in the aggression though, and the drop shots could certainly be part of the aggression. But the second serve returns, he crushed, he blistered, he played first strike tennis. So I'll be really interested to see if Novak comes out with aggression, because we know he's capable of that. And then the other thing is just looking over some of Alcaraz's recent matches where, he dropped a set, or he was challenged, or that loss. I have noticed that the forehand is slightly, ever so slightly more prone to errors if pushed out wide. So it's actually the backhand that's completely in lockdown a lot of the time, and you cannot get errors out of that. But if you're looking to bait him into spraying a little bit, maybe go at the forehand out wide.
Wow, there's some interesting patterns, and we know, of course, Novak and his team are kind of like mapping this out in chessboard like way. With Novak, these terms, we've talked about this a lot with Novak, and I mentioned this to you guys a couple of days ago. I want to ask our audience and us, and I want to go on like a year-long quest to find some other language that transcends these terms of offense and defense, particularly defense, because I think in tennis, it happens so fast. It's not like a football game where the squad is on the field. It's not even like boxing where you take 10 punches and you're kind of countering. The offense defense thing is so fast that there's something that transcends it. Because when I think of Novak, particularly in those tie breaks, yeah, he doesn't miss. He's applying pressure, not necessarily defense. He's not just reacting. So I want to find some other language for this. I'm going to even study some other things, whether it's martial arts or dance or movement. There's some other thing he does. I mean, the way this guy plays in these tiebreakers is unbelievable. I mean, it's at a whole other level, and it speaks to his genius. Not that he's saying, all right, hang in there with Carlos until you get to 6-all. But I think you're right, Amy, about these ways Novak is going to study it and learn from it. And over the long haul of a match, that's what makes this match interesting too, is that it's best of 5, and and obviously Novak has played more of those than Alcaraz, but lots of stuff to think about.
Yeah, and I really hope they do play a tiebreak, because Alcaraz has a very opposite approach to Novak. Carlos, I think he comes to net more. I think he drops shots more. I think he lobs more. I just think it's very much serve and volley. It's kitchen sink mode for Alcaraz in the tiebreaks.
Right, but it's not reckless if you own it. In other words, the tendency for someone to say that, and I know you didn't, say, yeah, he's going high risk. It's not risky if you own it. It's not risky for Steph Curry to shoot a 35-footer. That's American basketball. Right. So it's a mindset, and it gets to some developmental models. It gets back to how, for players this good, how they were envisioning the court when they were 8 years old, 10 years old. Goes back to that, to even practice sessions and practice matches and how you want to view things. Yeah, I mean, Novak's mode is more or less, I ain't missing, but he's applying pressure all right. He's definitely applying pressure, Novak, in those tiebreakers.
Yeah, I love that point, Joel. Like, one thing you'll never hear from me if I'm commentating on an Alcaraz match is, oh, he went to the drop shot, risky, like, or ballsy. It's like, no, just a shot, like a shot that he's super comfortable with and can execute over and over again like it's automatic. There's nothing risky or bold about it. It's just one of his shots. So I love that point. I looked more to Jannik Sinner, Amy, I think, than Marozsan when I was thinking about this. It's funny because I've thought a lot about what has Jannik done to make Alcaraz uncomfortable. And I think that has been mostly about hugging the baseline, minding the court position, which Djokovic does really well, and delivering constant power and pace off of both wings. Just don't give him time. Just rush, rush, rush. And I think that's the best way to make Carlitos uncomfortable. And I think Djokovic is actually really well suited to execute that. The problem is, this is a slow red clay court. So I have no doubts that Novak can do that, but will the conditions let him do that? That's my big question.
Yeah. If you want to take away time, it's really hard to do on a clay court. I have my questions about who will have the mental stamina in some of the longer rallies. And again, we know that the short rallies are still that category that are the most important, but I think a long rally can impact what comes next. And we know from the data that if you play a long rally, the chances are well over 80% that the very next rally is going to be a short rally. So there is a connection between the two. And both of these guys have shown that they can play the long rallies. So that's what makes this so interesting. What's going to give there? Like, who's going to have the stamina for this?
Well, and that's another way where I seek some more transcendent data or knowledge or language. Yeah, the long rally, the 0-4, but the statement made of winning a long rally and the carryover effect. I mean, again, I think sometimes these evaluative forms, I mean, it reminds me of the time I was talking to someone coming to net. He said, well, the first 6 times I did, it didn't work, so I stopped. That's not the point. The point is to run it a lot. And then when you do it at 4-all, you might still, it can work. So the faith in it and how that works. And so you make a good point, Amy, about the yield of the long rally. I wonder what the data is on whoever wins the long rally, what happens in the next 8 rallies. You see what I mean? The carryover effect, the next 8-10 rallies. Who wins those?
To me, one of the most fascinating statistics that I've ever heard is that most of the time, and it's something like, 51 or 52% of the time, the person in the match that won the majority of the long rallies loses the match. It just, why would that be? It just.
But see, this is the thing with some data too, and that occur. I mean, they lose the match 51% of the time.
Yeah, it's just above 50%. But
well,
it's
like
okay. So say for argument's sake, it's 50-50. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the sample size of long rallies are a lot smaller than the sample size of short rallies. So you're looking at a smaller slice of the pie if you're looking at the full match. So that's where I could see some randomness in that data set. But over the course of an entire data set of matches, like a very large one, that's a pretty shocking stat.
It's one of my favorites.
Of top 100 players. I mean, that's what data is. I mean, I suspect it plays out differently at the recreational level.
Well, you always say that, Joel, but you don't have any data. And actually, I do know that at every level, including there was one level where the rally lengths were slightly higher, and I think that was like boys 14s. But at every level, it is so similar that the most common occurrence in any sort of tennis at any level is a missed return. That is the most common play. 0-4 make up the preponderance of most points at every level. People argue with me over this, but it's true.
Oh no, well, I'll say it now, and we'll get to this match. Yeah, I think the 0-4 happens at lower levels because a lot of people can't keep the ball doing, and at the pro level, at the higher levels of pros, it happens because they must. At the pro level, they need to end the points that quick, because if they don't, someone will do it to them. And I think at the lower levels, it happens because a great many people are incapable of keeping the ball in play that long on a sustained basis. But that's a different discussion. That's a different show. But it is interesting how it occurs all these levels, and the missed return quality. So the missed returns and the service winners.
But you know,
Right.
just to, I mean, we may end up editing this out, but not capable of keeping the ball in play at what speed, you know what I mean, or what level.
Right.
So the game of tennis is very scalable. So, you know, this morning, Coco Gauff was not capable of keeping the rally going against Iga, you know, sustaining long rallies and X number of points because Iga's level was just too high. Well, I mean, you just can sort of scale that down to every level of tennis, including college, including juniors and that kind of thing. And that's why you get the same behavioral and the same patterns and the same statistical tendencies at every level. Now, there are some differences with regard to the serve, but that's another show.
All right. It wouldn't be an episode of 3 without a detour somewhere. Let's go to predicting this match. Joel, you don't have to predict the outcome if you don't want, but you can still talk about what you expect to see here.
An arduous fourth set with a potential fifth. That's what I see occurring. In other words, and I guess if I'd say I'd be more surprised if Novak won in straight sets than I would be surprised if Alcaraz won in straight sets. That would be more surprising to me. Yeah, I'm really excited to see this because again, it's so unknown. I mean, the Madrid one happened, yeah, and as we talked about, Carlos was ascending then, and he's even better now. 2 out of 3. Madrid with its altitude. Now we're at Roland Garros. I'm incredibly excited to see this match. I want to see also, does Novak, I did some research, I saw he averages about 29 net rushes per match. Is he going to do that more, less versus Alcaraz? Not to be on him all the time as much as just shake him up a little and put him back on his heels. Make sure Alcaraz doesn't attack him sometimes, because Novak shows signs of innovation over the course of his career, many different tactics. Also, I think the drop shot. All right, combined total drop shots, 40.
A lot. I mean, both of them are doing it so well in this tournament, and that's why I think court position is going to be really important. I don't think either man can afford to play too deep behind the baseline. It's going to happen sometimes. I mean, sometimes you get pushed back, but it's going to spell trouble. Amy, what do you think?
Those cat and mouse points are so entertaining, and most of the time the drop shot is followed by the person who hit the drop shot coming into the net. So you got 2 guys at the net, and then there's different pace volleys, there's hard volleys, there's, crushing the ball, there's little lobs, there's retrievals, and it just makes for such high quality entertainment. So I can't wait.
All right. I'm going with Alcaraz. I think that the things that Novak has the biggest advantage in this head-to-head, some of the serve return battle stuff, some of his ability to kind of rush his opponents. I feel like the conditions make that an uphill battle. I think that really favors Alcaraz, just the speed of this court, how heavy these tennis balls have been, and I think the speed and the power is really gonna come out. And I don't really have too many questions mentally that Alcaraz can't do this, because we know that if there are any issues mentally, Djokovic will take full advantage of that. I mean, he always will. But I do think Carlitos is ready. So we will be back after the match to talk about what went down. Really excited for that. That'll do it for this episode of 3. We're available on all podcast platforms. We appreciate it if you leave a rating and a review on Spotify and Apple. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you next time on the next episode of 3.